Hi, everybody, and welcome to a very special A Conversation with Brian. Our guest tonight, Maurice Mcdavid. Maurice serves as a K-5 building dual language principal in West Chicago's Elementary District number 33. His fight for equity extends beyond the school day as he and a fellow educator also co host a podcast called Black, Brown, and Bilingue that endeavors to bring unity and uplift the voices of the Black and Brown community. Maurice is the author of What I Always Wanted to Be, in the first of a series of books that he is currently working on that will star Maurice and his children. And so, without further ado, Maurice, welcome to A Conversation with Brian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here. Quick story. I was, as I normally am, on social media, and I was just kind of just surfing through Twitter, and probably in early, maybe October or November, I see this fascinating guy on Twitter, and I'm like, this guy is going to write a book, and he's a principal. And I just started kind of looking at his page, and it was you, Maurice. And I'm like, I gotta have him on my show because he seems so fascinating. He seems so positive, and we're all about being positive. I think one of the things, Maurice, I really thought about when I started this show was the inundation of negativity that's coming from the outside on our profession. And you and I both know, me as a former principal, you as a sitting principal, that there are so many wonderful things that are happening in our schools every single day. So many children moving along, we're getting better and better. So many educators putting more tools in their toolkits to improve on behalf of their students. And so my goal was to be positive by design, really, instead of being negative by default. And so I said, I'm going to find all the great educators, have them on my show, and tell the world how great they are and show what they are doing. And so at the beginning of each one of my shows, Maurice, I ask my guests to tell a little bit about your personal story, your professional journey, so our audience can kind of get to know who you are. So who is Maurice Mcdavid?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, Brian, again, thank you so much for the invitation, and definitely thank you for doing this. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of negativity out there right now, and so I think we got to take time and pause and reflect on those positive things. And I would argue that really that's a major part of who I am as a person, and as a leader and educator, is reflecting on those positives. I grew up in it was a small town. Now it's
Yeah.
kind of a city, home to NIU, DeKalb, Illinois,
Okay.
home to Northern Illinois University, and grew up there, and was super fortunate to have just a series of really good teachers. In fact, I would then go on and start my educational career here in DeKalb, and ended up teaching my first grade teacher's daughter. It was one of those.
Oh, it went full circle, huh?
Yes, yeah, right. So,
Wow.
and so many of those situations. In fact, even the building where I'm currently the sitting principal, the principal prior to me, who was there for 13 years, was my middle school principal.
Wow.
Right. So, and he had left here to go out to, West Chicago, and was the principal there. And then I ended up, so again, just a small world
Sure.
education is.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess a little bit about how I got into education, and then certainly we can. I don't like to talk too much about me, but since I'm here,
You know what? This is all about Maurice tonight. This is about you. I want you to,
all right,
and one of the things again, educators are so modest. And again, it's not bragging. It's actually being just sharing our story because when you share and you talk about you just like you wrote this book, and we're going to talk about your book, but when you share and talk about you, some kid, some adult might say, "Oh, that's a connection. That I can do that because
yeah,
he did it, right?" And so
yeah.
it's not bragging. It's like really helping us pave the way for others.
Right, absolutely. Shining that light.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I I will say, again, was very fortunate to have a good education growing up. I went off to Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, played some Division III football there. And when I arrived at Knox, I was going to be a political science major, go to law school, wanted to be the first Black president. And, Barack Obama came along and ruined that. So
He
I was
beat
like,
you to
okay,
it,
I
huh?
got to change, got to change my career or whatever. But what actually ended up happening was I got closed out of a political science class. And so I took a class instead called School and Society. And in that class, the teacher took us to go see freedom writers.
Oh,
And Hilary Swank's character says, I was going to become a lawyer, but by the time you're defending a kid in the courtroom, it's too late, and the real battle is in the classroom. And that I'm telling you, that next week I went and changed, signed up to be an education major, and
wow.
ended up minoring in elementary education with majoring in elementary education with a minor in Spanish and a minor in history. Got middle school endorsements in Spanish and English and social studies. And then ended up going back to DeKalb, worked as a paraprofessional for a year in a special education classroom for students with severe and profound disabilities, which taught me just a ton.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Then for there, taught 8th grade social studies and language arts for 3 years, taught middle school Spanish for 2 years. During that time, earned my master's in ed leadership, and then got a chance to be dean of students at DeKalb High School. In fact, my first year there was my 10-year class reunion. I'd been out
Oh,
of high school
wow.
10 years.
Wow.
And I was now back as a dean, which made evaluation season very interesting, right?
I hear you.
But I will just say, I think throughout all of that, and then I was an assistant principal at a dual language elementary building for a year, and now this is year 2 of being principal at this dual language school that I'm at now.
Wow. And so you've had a varied career already. And I heard you talk about, the Spanish piece. I was listening to your podcast the other day. And again, we're going to get to your book, but I was listening to your podcast the other day, Black, Brown, and Bilingue. And it was fascinating. You had talked about this idea of language of success. And can you kind of expand on that? Because, again, words are very powerful, and we don't realize how powerful those words are when we give kids labels, or we say things that may not seem negative, but they hold negative connotations, and kids or adults hold on to them. And so this idea of language of success, it really fascinated me.
Yeah. So a good colleague, a good friend of mine, her name is Lisette Jacobson. That's my podcast partner.
Yep.
We ended up going through our masters together. We actually started teaching together in DeKalb, and we'd be after class during our master's program having these conversations, and like, man, that was a dope conversation. We should have recorded that,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
out of that was birthed this podcast, and out of the podcast has come some professional development that we've put together for some different opportunities that we've presented. And so one of them is the language of success, and it really just emphasizes this idea that we can and should and need to elevate languages other than standard English. And when I say standard English, right, I'm talking, what you hear people say things like, well, that's not proper.
Right.
But even in that statement, right, you've made actually now a value statement,
A
a
judgment
judgment.
statement. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so we really try to emphasize through this PD that it's important that we remember kids receive love
Yeah.
in languages other than standard English, right? And so
So huge.
those languages should not be called wrong or improper. And so it's not in opposition to standard English, but it is in the idea that we can elevate languages other than standard English, whether that be another language, Spanish or Arabic or Hindi,
Right.
or whether that be other variations of English, like, academically what is referred to as African American vernacular English,
Sure.
or Chicano English.
Yep.
and talking about how those maintain certain structures and are also linguistically advanced,
Yeah.
such that they have value.
I
And
love that.
again, people receive love there. So,
Yeah, I love that you say that. And I love that idea, because once we put a judgment on somebody's language, we actually put a judgment on their intelligence, right? And so we're like, you can speak any way and have a different vernacular and still be just as intelligent as somebody who's speaking standard English. But if we, as the educators, say something to a student that makes them, a student who traditionally may have been marginalized, and we say it in a way that says you need to speak this way, you're going to many times shut them down, or they're going to feel like I'm not as smart. And so I love that idea of language of success. That's awesome. Hey, let's turn to your book, because I think that's something that caught my eye when I was going through Twitter and I saw your book's cover. Talk about your book. What inspired you to write this book?
yeah, definitely. There's a couple of things. I think number one, for me, is my children. I grew up, my mother raised me and my two brothers, and my father, and I always couple this with my father and I today have developed a relationship in adulthood, and we've
Sure.
worked through some things.
Sure.
And so I'm really appreciative of that. And I mention that because, I think he's done some things to attempt to redeem some of that time that was lost.
Sure.
But I will say that him not being around when I was younger was definitely a motivation for me to be the best father I could be.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot about that, both with my biological children, but also in my work as a youth pastor in my church, and also really a mentor in the community. It's funny because today I just had a former student message me on Facebook, and she is now looking to put together some mentor work and mentor organizations for the community. And she said, Mr. McDavid, I'd love if you could be involved.
See, that's huge. Think about that imprint you put on this person, this student, because again, you shared something of yourself and mentored this person, and now this person wants to do it for somebody else and somebody's else. And so
Yes.
this just magnifies, and that's what our profession does. I don't think people understand this. We create all these success stories.
Right, 100%. It was definitely very affirming for me. I'm looking at my schedule because I'm back in school right now. I'm working on my EDS,
Hmm.
and then we'll continue into my EDD program. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell her yes and fully commit. But the fact that she asked me
Yeah,
made me realize, hey, this is something that, and maybe I can be in an advisory role where I'm going to play the background a little bit more.
sure.
But that definitely, I think, was part of that inspiration for that book. Was again my children, but also my biological children. I have three, but then also the young people that I've had the chance to work with and come alongside and encourage in those formidable years.
That is so awesome. So I just popped your book cover on the screen, what I always wanted to be. And so tell us a little bit about the book. I know that being an African American male is so important for a number of young people. And so tell us about why you wrote the book. Tell us about what is the book about, and you have some ideas of making this kind of a series.
Yeah. So first off, I want to shout out my artist, graphic designer. His name is Divine Lee, or Willie Lesby. Does great work. I was looking to have somebody do the artwork who was connected to me,
Yeah.
and honestly, I was looking for a Black artist to come alongside me, and so my brother had kind of dabbled in some art when he was younger, and couldn't quite get free enough to do it.
Right.
But then I was scrolling through Facebook, and my cousin who lives in Chicago, her boyfriend does this work on the side. He actually works with children for a living as a BCBA, and then does this on the side. So I reached out to him and we were able to connect. So I'm excited about that. The whole format of the book is basically talking about all the different things I wanted to be as a child, from a lawyer to a rapper to a policeman to a firefighter, and the reasons why.
Yeah.
And then the second half of the book kind of reveals, well, in this one job that I have, I get to be a hero, and I get to keep people safe, and I get to talk to people about justice, and I get to tell people that there's hope in the world, and I get to share with people that their brown skin is beautiful. And that one job that wraps all of that up is being a dad. And so
Awesome.
since releasing this book, I've ran into a couple of different folk who are on their way to being parents, who are expecting currently. And I said, hey, I got something for you, because you may not have even known, but when that child enters this world, you're going to realize this is what you've always wanted.
This is our purpose, right? This is our purpose.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, when you start to talk about being a dad, and I have two daughters, and again, I feel like I have hundreds of kids, because of being a principal and being an educator for over 30 some years. But the impact that we have, and I don't think sometimes we realize that impact. You walking down the hall, Maurice, in your building, you say the slightest word, everybody's watching you.
Mhm.
You go out in the neighborhood, you go out anywhere as a
Mhm.
black male, everybody's watching you. And
Mhm.
so the impact that we have on how we behave, how we treat others, the legacy that we leave is huge. And so you writing this book just really made me feel so great, because I saw kids who look like me, kids who look like my kids who look like kids, in my former school, and kids who I work with. And so my next question is, how do you see this book used possibly in schools? And I'll get back to how families can use it, but I wanted to segue to, how do you think this book can be used in schools with teachers?
Absolutely. So I'll share with you one of the ways that we've used it already, at my school. Our literacy coach came to me and said, hey, Mr. McDavid, we are planning a literacy night, and the theme for the whole week is going to be changing our world. And so we're going to talk about different ways that we change our world, and different things that we can be in the future that help to change the world.
Sure.
And I said, okay, excellent. And she said, I know you've talked to me about your book. Would you mind reading that as our opening activity for this literacy night that really kind of sets the tone for talking about all these different careers? And I think, especially in early elementary, right? Oftentimes first grade, you're talking about, your community, and you're
Right.
talking about who are the different people in the community.
Sure.
Um, but I started thinking back, like, man, when I think about all the different people that play a role in the community, and the books that I grew up reading, they didn't have people that looked like me
Yeah.
in those uniforms
Yeah.
or playing those different roles.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that we can do automatically is just remind people, right, that um, that there are people that look like
Sure.
you and I doing these jobs, that are police officers, that are firefighters. And I got to be honest, the police officer piece, when I originally wrote this book, probably over, or originally thought of this idea, I should say, 2 or 3 years ago, the police conversation was already slightly different, but I think it's
Sure.
real different now, right, in the midst of everything.
Yeah.
And I think I thought a lot about that when I saw myself illustrated in a police uniform. And I thought, wow, what a difference it might make to maybe change some of that narrative and some of that
Yeah.
conversation. I actually locally here serve on our police review board.
Yeah.
And so I've been working with our police chief, who was a 30-year, state police officer prior to coming here to lead the department, Black man. And
Yeah.
when he walks in the uniform, I find myself, as a 30-some-year-old being like, oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, I see you, brother.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. So
Well, I think that's important. Again, representation matters, and making sure that we have those conversations, those open, honest conversations. My cousin is a police chief, and he does a wonderful job with community policing and reaching out and doing so many things. And I think we sometimes forget that many of our family members are officers or police officers, but we see a narrative in the media that sometimes paints a different picture, which is not. I can't say it's untrue in some instances, but we
right,
have to really continue to make things better and make kids feel like, okay, um, this officer is somebody I should be able to relate to, but we have to make sure that they understand the history.
right, right, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I think there's varying levels. My hope too is just that it exposes students to the idea that they can be anything that they want to be. And again, I think that goes for all of our students, particularly our students of color. I'll share with you just real quick. I had a situation when I was probably a junior in high school. So we're talking 2005, that I was at an event in Harvey, Illinois, which is a south suburb of Chicago. I was at this church event, and I was talking with these folk that were my age, and I said, yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to go to school and become either a lawyer or a doctor. And this young Black girl said to me, "Those are white people jobs."
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, I hold on to that today as a principal, because I want to make sure that our kids are aware all jobs are their potential jobs.
Exactly.
And again, my building currently is about 80% Latino, um, and so I think about what I kind of mean, what I represent when I step in there and read this
Sure.
book to them as
Sure.
well. So
Man, I love, when you said that, it's just so interesting because I'm much older than you are. But when I was coming up, in the 60s and 70s, and again, my parents talked to me about, again, our history. you know, there is no job that we can't do and that we weren't doing, right? And so, but there's this gap that happened where a lot of our kids have not seen themselves being able to do certain professions. And I do have to be honest, I went to Catholic school from first grade to eighth grade, and I had a very fine experience. I struggled early on to learn how to read, but my parents, my dad was a principal, he was a reading teacher, and my mom went to college, and they said, we got you. Because I have to be honest, back then, and I talked to my brother and sister, about this, from first grade to eighth grade, I can't remember ever seeing in my Catholic school any books with people of color. And it's not a knock on them. I'm not trying to slam them, but it's just, if my parents didn't fill that void, and we have a lot of kids whose parents can't fill that void for a number of reasons, not because they don't want to, then
right,
in terms of sharing with them that this is possible, these are, again, in my house, it was like, the question wasn't, are you going to college? The question is where.
right.
And so we have to help kids understand that the world is their oyster, and there are people who look like them who come that do every kind of profession. And so what you're doing is just really setting that table and giving them an idea that yes, this is possible.
Yeah. I think even the idea of being an author um,
Yep.
is one that I took a moment to think about, because I remember when I read this story to our students, I said, I remember as a second grader doing a young authors, you know, um, event, and writing this story and getting a chance to just kind of go through that process of writing and then editing and, illustrating, and then we laminated it and we bound it, and we did some of those things. So I think I want them too to see, like, because I'm somebody that they know now, like I'm just Mr. McDavid,
Yeah.
but Mr. McDavid can write a book. So again, you can write a book, and I look forward to them getting a chance to see, the next few that'll kind of come forward.
How do you, and again, we've talked a little bit about this, but, how do you as a Black man, and you shared most of it, show up in this book in terms of the different jobs. But thinking about your next book, the project that you're going to work on in the future, what do you envision that looking like?
Yeah, so, right now, this book is kind of the kickoff, but I definitely, so I guess you got to kind of know this little bit of history about me. I am a lover of hip hop,
Hmm.
and so my first year teaching, I would write my name on the board. It'd be Mr. McDavid, and there'd be the date underneath. And every day I would change my name to something different with a D. So it'd be Mr. McDiablo, and I'd put,
Right.
spicy, or I'd put Mr. Mc, don't you dare. And then like I draw an eye and like, I'm
Sure.
watching you.
Yeah.
So, but one of them was Mr. McDizzle. That's my rap name.
That's and
And
that's your Twitter handle.
exactly. So it's rooted way back in my
Yeah.
first year of teaching.
I didn't realize that when I was listening to when I saw you on Twitter. I didn't realize that's where it came from.
Yes, yeah, rooted way back in my first year of teaching. And so at the end of my first year of teaching, in fact, as a student teacher, I had written and recorded a song for my kids to say goodbye to them. And then at the end of my first year of teaching, I wrote and recorded a song and made a music video for the kids. And, it's out there on YouTube. You can find
Oh,
it.
we're gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, the baddest in DeKalb, and it was a spoof of another spoof song, and so it was a lot of fun. But so as a result, when I became an elementary school assistant principal, I wrote this song and recorded it for one of our PBIS assemblies.
Hmm.
I wrote this song called Kafudi, and Kafudi was one of our PBIS words, which means keep hands and feet and other objects to yourself.
Okay.
And so I wrote this song, and actually it's kind of a banger. Like, I surprised myself. It, kind of came in hard like old 90s rap. Kafudi, keep hands and feet and other objects to yourself. Do it for your health. Okay.
Is it recorded? Is this on YouTube too? Did it go?
That
Did
is
it go
on
viral?
YouTube as well. Yes. Yeah. Kafudi. I made another one
Oh
called
my
on
goodness.
the Bus. So and then since then, here at Turner, I've made them, and as part of like our PBIS awards, the kids get a chance to be in the music video with me. So the premise of this next few books is going to be Mr. McDizzle, my dad, the rapper, is going to be book one. And so it's going to be told from the point of view of my children, and about me being this famous rapper in their mind, and me really just being a principal. like
I love it.
They think I'm famous, but I'm trying to explain to them, no, dad goes to elementary schools to make kids happy, but I'm not, I'm certainly no big. So, and then in each preceding book, it'll kind of emphasize one of my children and one part of our relationship that we have together.
I love it.
And so my son will go on tour with me because he likes to rap as well.
Yeah.
He's my oldest, and my middle child, we're gonna have a dance battle because she always thinks she's the best dancer. And my youngest child, we're gonna just have a straight out wrestling match because she's the one who always wants to tussle with dad and wrestle with them and those things.
I love it.
That's kind of those next few books, but I wanted to kick it off with this idea that fatherhood, again, whether biological or just by the role that you play,
Sure.
and parenting in general, right? That mentoring in general is really one of the most powerful things that we can do. And so I'm really excited. I've got the first book written in the editing process right now, and then sending it off to my illustrator. So
And so you talked a little bit about how teachers can use the book, and you read it to your students. And so, let's kind of turn to parents. For any parents out there, what would you say to them in terms of your book and how they can use your book?
yeah, I think for parents, I think a couple of things. I think number one, um, I think sometimes in pop culture, parents play the bad guy, right? Parents, the role of the parents is always like, I think about like in cartoons, even kids' cartoons, parents are either buffoonish or they're mean.
Right.
And I think this is a way to kind of really connect with your child and just, I think about some of the things that my mother did for me and how she cared and how she protected. Like last week, like like on my 34th birthday last week, my mother's calling me and messaging me and giving me a card, and
Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity to really sit and bond. I think the illustrations are really powerful too, to be able to kind of talk through, what are the different experiences that we have as a parent-child relationship.
Sure.
In what way, do I help you? But then I think we can take that and even flip it a little bit more, right? Okay, what way can you go and be a hero even right now?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
way can you go and take care of somebody even right now, right? Whether that's a younger sibling or a friend. I think it just kind of sets up that idea that we care for one another, and I
Yeah.
think can be a great basis for conversation.
I think sometimes when we look at, and you talked about rappers, but also other people who are famous, I think sometimes we think that that's not attainable, and we think that's the definition of success, or that's the definition of influence. But you just said it. We can influence right where we are, in any position that we are. We can be a friend. We can be a person who listens. We can do a lot of things right within our own orbit to influence for the good. And I think, your book, and you said something earlier, and I don't have to disagree. You said that, in your next book, you're going to be your kid thinks you're a rapper, and that's and you're famous, and then you said, but I just go to work and help people. But you are. Think about what you do. Our profession as a principal, as educators, we're the profession that creates every single profession. And so think about, the impact that we have on this world every single day. And so you are, McDizzle. You are, famous, and impactful. And so I know you know that, but I just, want to make sure that people understand that, even if, whatever you do in your school building, I believe every single person in a school is an educator, from our custodians, from our cafeteria workers, from our bus drivers, from our instructional assistants, our teachers. We're all educators, because if we have an opportunity to impact, to influence, to change somebody's life, to help them learn, then we are educators. Um, I did want to say, or ask you, because we have about 10 minutes left, but I did want to ask you, as we start to transition, before we end, um, in your daily work as an administrator, and you see the challenges that we have in our profession. These last 2 years have been unprecedented. And I have to be honest, I retired in 2017, and I do some consulting, and I hear the stories, and I see how much it's being put on educators. Um, Maurice, for people who are thinking about education, who are potential teachers and instructional assistants and administrators, for people who are thinking about getting into the profession, what would you tell them about what to expect?
Yeah, I that's a great question. I think, in terms of expectation, I want to be fully transparent
Yeah,
with folk. I don't want people coming in, thinking um, that education is an easy task. But I don't think it's ever been easy, and I think it's always been something that, if done well, is going to require some sweat equity
yeah,
and some I think persistence. So what I would say, though, right now, is definitely, expect um, to have a kid in your class who you will look at the end of the year and just be amazed with how far they've come.
yeah,
Um, and I say that because I think multiple different socioeconomic and political situations have created, it seems at times, bigger and bigger gaps, right, of where kids are coming in to your classroom
mhm,
at. Um, and when you get done with that kid who maybe came in reading a grade level and a half below, and you're sending them out on grade level, just be ready for that. And what I would say is, look for that, though, right? You have to look for those moments, because unfortunately the other piece that you might expect is some challenges that go along with that, right?
yeah,
You may expect, um, um, parents who maybe don't fully understand the educational system,
yeah,
and some of its limitations. Currently, you may have, political rhetoric that is flying around education, that you presents a challenge to you as a teacher and your teaching style. So all of those things are still going to be there, right?
sure,
I wish I could tell you that, like some of those things are just, oh, none of that's really, that, well, no, it's there.
yeah,
But if you can take the energy to look for those incredible celebrations of the kid who at the beginning of the year could not work independently or couldn't control his or her emotions, and now all of a sudden is leaving with some tools in their toolbox,
yeah.
to be able to regulate those emotions. I mean, man, just it leaves you feeling ready for summer. Believe me,
Yeah, yeah.
ready to go and kick your feet up for a quick second, but also actually energized, I think, and excited about the potential of the next school year. So
Just listening to, I can feel your passion. And, one of the things that, again, when we start to look for those little victories or those little um, areas where kids are being successful, we have to. We have to, celebrate. Celebration is the fuel to our engine. And if we can't find little things to celebrate, we're going to run on empty. We're going to run on empty. And so there's, and the challenge is because we have, and I would always, kind of frame it in this way. When I was an administrator, principal, we would have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 students who took up a lot of our time, and they needed it. They needed that. But that time made it feel like it was 100% of our time. And so we started to forget about all the great things that were happening. And although we were working with those students, and those students were progressing as well, but they were taking up, they can take up a lot of time. Just like a few parents can take up a lot of time, and it makes you feel like all parents are like that, but it's not. Right. And so we have to really make sure that we are really putting things into perspective. And so,
yeah, no, I think that was a lesson that I pulled out of my 3 years as a dean of students. As a dean, literally your job description is discipline. And so what happens is I had 720 kids on my caseload. I saw about 40 of them on a regular
Yeah.
basis, right? More regular than either of us, either the kid or me, wanted to really see them, right? But
But they
what
needed you. But they
what
needed
I
you because
they did,
because
they did.
they don't like you said, regulation, all the social or emotional skills, those are some gaps that they don't have yet, and so they needed you and others to help them learn those skills.
Particularly, and you know, I think that's one of the challenges today is really to think of it that way, right? If a kid does not know what 2 times 2 is, you don't give them lunch attention.
Yeah.
You scaffold the lesson and you try to get them to figure out what 2 plus. So if a kid does not have the skill to regulate, the skill to be able to manage that conflict differently, then we have to be willing to teach them that
Yep.
skill.
Yep. Exactly.
But I will say that again can be tiring, and so I made time to go sit with my kids who weren't being sent to my office.
Sure.
So I went to them, and I'd go and
Have
meet
to.
them in the lunchroom and chat with them. And I started started what was called peer mediation. And then all of a sudden I had this group of student leaders who I was working with who were actually helping to mediate.
I think we lost. Did we lose you, Maurice?
Uh,
I think we lost you
I'm
just for a second.
Yeah, there we go. There
Yeah,
we go. We're
you
back.
were saying you're some peer mediators that you're helping. They were helping to mediate. Did
Yeah, so started a peer mediation program, and then they were actually helping to mediate conflict amongst their peers, right? Where a student could step in and help. But what I got a chance to work with the peer mediators, right? Instead of having to necessarily mediate that conflict, I trained them to do it, and
sure.
I got to work with those student leaders. So it was really nice.
Yeah. Or Maurice, I do appreciate you coming on. Your story is awesome. The book, I hope it becomes a bestseller. If people want to, and I will put this on my YouTube channel, the link. But if people want to buy the book, or contact you, follow you, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Twitter at Prince McDizzle, Princ, and then Mcdizzle, Prince McDizzle. And then you can actually also follow our podcast, Black, Brown, and Bilingue, on Twitter. Probably just search it because the Twitter handle is like BLCK,
Yeah.
because we had to try to make it fit. So if you search Black, Brown, and Bilingue, podcast is available on all podcast formats. And then also, various places, Instagram, those different things. As far as the book, though, the book is currently only available in the Lulu book store or marketplace. So if you would Google search Lulu, and of course I'll share the link as well. But if you Google search Lulu bookstore, and then once you're there on the website, which is lulupress.com, then you can search for Maurice McDavid, or you can search for What I Always Wanted to Be.
That's awesome. And so when we put it, we repost this on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter, we will put that information in there so people can find you. Again, thanks so much. I am so thankful that you came on. I'm thankful that I was searching and I found McDizzle in October and November, so I could find your information so we could get in touch and have you come on. You were great tonight, and I think so many people will learn from you. Will as you write another book and another book, so many kids will say, "That's me. That's me. That's possible. I can do that." And even parents will be uplifted because, as you said, in a number of our cartoons, parents are kind of looked at as buffoons, and people make jokes of them. But we need to uplift how parents are seen and how we really relate to our kids. And so, again, thank you, Maurice, for coming on tonight on a conversation with Brian. And next In 2 weeks, we will have Don Parker, who is another awesome educator, speaker, international just dynamo. And he's written a book, Building Bridges. It really talks about student relationships. As Maurice, you really talked about, all of his themes tonight were around relationships. And so we'll see you in 2 weeks. Maurice, thank you so much.